Hi everyone, welcome to another happy pumpkin blanket tutorial. I'm now going to show you all how to join your squares with the slip stitch into the back loops only. I think most of you probably know how to do this already, but I wanted to make extra sure that we were all on the same page. This technique is a really good one for beginners, and it creates a really nice clean cut looking square once they're all joined up. I must admit I'm not usually a fan of slip stitching squares together. I'm more of a join as you go kind of gal, but I do love the look of this joining method in the end. It creates a really strong seam and less holes, so I find it's a little bit more durable. I ended up gifting this blanket to my little guy, and less holes for his toes to poke through is always a better thing. So it's been a tough, good little blanket for him. So let's get started on the tutorial. For the join, for the slip stitching, I'm going to use the same same yarn that we were using in the pattern and the same 5mm hook. Okay, you don't want to use a different kind of hook or a different size. You might be tempted, but don't do it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to join them in this way. No particular reason. I've got 4 here because I want to show you how to do the cross section. So I guess one thing to keep in mind when you're doing this blanket is that the way I worked it up was I worked all of my rows and then I joined up all my columns once the whole blanket was finished. So I don't slip stitch every square together individually. I work them up in rows. So what I mean by that is I started at the bottom of the blanket and it was all oyster solid squares. So I worked up 14 oyster solid colored squares like this. And then I worked up the row above that, which I believe is row 14 off the top of my head. I think it was 14 by 15, right? So it was the bottom of the pumpkin and then a few oyster at the side. Okay, so, and then I slip stitched right straight across the row. And I did that all the way up the blanket. And then once all of the rows were complete and the whole blanket was put together, then I went back and I did all of my columns. I slip stitched down all of the columns. I found that to be the easiest way, and it was, way less ends to be sewing in if I did it that way. So no particular rhyme or reason for these colors. These were the ones I worked up in my previous tutorials. So these are the ones I'm going to use. So just remember that when you're doing, if you're going to do it that way, that your bottom row is going to be this one here. And then your top row is going to be the one facing you when you're working them together, because you want the right sides of your square facing each other, because you're going to be looking at the backs of your squares when you're slip stitching them together. Okay, and then when you flip it up, that will be the row on top. All right, so just make sure that when you're slip stitching them together, you know which one's going where and what's going on. It's easy to get a little turned around. So I'm going to get these guys out of the way here, and I'm just going to fold that over like that. Okay, so I have my right sides facing each other or my wrong sides facing out. Okay, and I'm going to start with a slip stitch on my hook. So I make my slip stitch, and actually I don't actually put it on my hook just yet. Okay, so for all of my joining, I did also use oyster. You can use whatever color you want, but I used oyster, and so the pattern will be written with enough oyster in it to make it work. So what we do is, when we're looking at our squares here, you have a chain 2 in every corner. Okay, so you're going to attach into that chain 2. All right, not your chain 1. That would be your chain 1 over here. You're going to attach into your chain 2, into that back loop. It's technically the back loop, because when we flip this over and we're looking at the right side, that's your back loop, right? But when you're working on the back side, it actually looks like your front loop or your outside loop. However you need to think about it, it's going to be the one closest to you, okay? And then we're going to insert our hook into that same chain 2, okay? Over here, the one closest to your edge, not over here, right here. And into the back loop of this one as well, or the outside loop. And then we're going to attach our slip knot onto our hook. Pull it snug. And I'm going to just hold my tail. Okay, I'm going to hold my tail right here and pull through those loops, yarn over and pull through to secure it. All right. And we are simply going to slip stitch across to the other side of this square. So into that back loop, okay, and into the back loop over here as well. Slip stitch. Try to do your slip stitches loosely. You don't want them to be too tight because your squares will bunch together and pucker. Okay, back loop, slip stitch. Back loop, slip stitch. And just to show you, you have your V here. I'm going into this one. Okay. Make sure you're lining up all of your V's. Otherwise, your squares will be a little bit off. And I do want to show you what happens when we get to a knot. So maybe in my next squares, when I join them to these guys, so we just slip stitch all the way across. Okay. And then the final slip stitch of the square is going to be your chain 1. So this first chain here, not this one over here, this one. Okay, this first one right here. Same on this side, this first one. Okay, and now we can join our next 2 squares. So if I open that up, that's what that looks like. Okay, now I want this one down here, just for fun. So I'm going to fold this over. And I'm going to insert into that chain 2 over here. And the same on this side, making sure that your yarn is behind you here. Okay, you don't have to do anything fancy, you just slip stitch them together. All right, and it looks just like that. Oh, I said I wanted to work over a knot just so I could show you. Let's see if I can find a knot here. Where's my knot? There's one. Maybe I want it on my orange one because it'll be easier. There's my knot. Okay. Just want you guys to be able to see what I do when I get to those knots, just so that your squares end up looking super beautiful. Okay, so slip stitching. Slip stitching across, not doing anything special, minding our own business, and then bam, we come upon a knot. What do we do with the knot? Maybe I got ahead of myself. We are not yet at the knot. Oops. Almost there. Okay, we have come upon a knot. So this is where you finish your rounds, and so you have a little bumpy knot there. So we're going to into the back loop over here. When you look at this, maybe I can get my needle out here. You have your knot, but you see a little V right here, right? So this is actually a loop in here. It's tight, but it's there, okay? So jam your hook in there. Jam it in, okay? There it is. Oops, I dropped my loop. Too much talking. There, okay? And pull through. And now we're on the other side of the knot. So when you made that knot, you slip stitched into a stitch. Well, there's a knot in the way, but there is a loop back here. See that guy? It's going to be tight, It's going to be tight, but you can do it. Jam that hook in there. There. Okay? And that will hide that knot, and you'll never see it, and everything will work out perfectly. So I have made it to the very end of my super long row of 2 squares. And I'm going to cut my yarn. Notice how I only worked into the first chain 2, the first of the chain 2 in my corner here, okay? So that's what your squares should look like. So if you pull them apart, you kind of have that little zigzaggy seam, okay? So that's how they look joined in the back loops only. So it creates a really nice clean edge. Wonderful. Now I'm going to fold it over this way, and we're going to work our column, okay? So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to put our hook into the first chain there. My yarn's getting away on me. Okay, do a slip knot and put it on your hook. Do. Pull through. I like to hold the tail. It just kind of gives you a little more purchase. Okay, look, I have a knot. So I'm going to work into this back loop here on the one side of the knot. And then when you look at it again, it's much easier to see in the oyster actually, isn't it? I'm going to work into this back loop here on the other side of the knot. Okay, don't try and work into the knot. There are stitches on either side of it. Just line them up and everything will work out. Okay. And we're just going to slip stitch across, do our thing. Take your time. I know it's hard not to rush, because it feels like you're completing the blanket and you get anxious. But take your time. Make sure you get all of the loop. You don't want to split the ply and then have random stragglers. You want it to look nice and neat. Okay, so I've made it to the corner here. Now what do we do? Well, we only worked into one side of each chain, right? So we have to work into that second chain in our corner. So for this one, it's this one right here. Work into that back loop. And then over here, it's this one, okay? And then we're not going to do anything. We're just going to jump right over that and find our second chain in the corner of this square. And work into the back loops. They can actually be pretty tight and a little hidden. I'm getting lucky here in this tutorial that they are not, but sometimes once you've done all your rows, then they can get pretty tight. So make sure you're getting into the right one. And you just keep slip stitching. And look, I have another knot where we joined our round in our square. So I'm just going to find that back loop, wiggle my hook in, and keep going. And then on this side, ooh, this one's tight. Look at that. Look at how tiny that is. Use your fingernails. Get in there. There we go. Almost at the end. There we go. And then fasten off. So let's open up our square. there you have it. Okay, so that's how they look when they're all joined up with the slip stitch and the back loops only. Okay, for sewing in the ends, let's just do it for the sake of completion here. Okay, we have our knot. I like to work into the color that's going to hide it the most. So I just kind of work my way down the back of one of your trebles in the corner here. Okay, straight through those back stitches, and then I'm going to just simply weave it back and forth in this corner to secure it. Okay, weave, sew, whatever. There we go. 3-4 times. You don't have to worry too much about it if you're using real wool like this, because it will actually felt. Your ends will felt a little bit, even if it is a superwash wool. It's the beauty of yarn. Okay, so that's how I sew in all of my tails. I just take it down the back of one of the treble stitches and then back and forth in the corner. Okay, so that's how you do your slip stitching. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.